All right, it looks like we are live. Welcome to BrigadeCon 2016, an interview with Pat. Is it Kilbane or Kilbane? Kind of like Taco Bell or Taco Bell? How do you pronounce
Wow.
that best?
I think, gosh, I think I do it both ways,
Okay,
Well, Pat Kilbane. I don't know. What did I just do there? I think I might have been even there.
Kilbane.
Pat Kilbane.
Kilbane. Yeah,
Kilbane.
I always like to
I
hear how
think
people say Taco Bell or Best Buy. You want to go to Best Buy or you want to go to Best Buy?
right. Sure. Yeah, there's a guy who's in Ireland named James Kilbane, who's a gospel singer, and he pronounces it Kilbane, So I was like, the first time I heard it say it, I'm like, what? What do you do? Yeah, but, he knows better than anybody because he's still there, So
Right.
that would be the original pronunciation.
Okay. Well, again, thanks for being here for this interview.
Oh,
Just a reminder to the folks watching this too, BrigadeCon is a online role-playing game convention where there's panels, games, and many of these are going to be posted online. So for those watching live, welcome. Post your comments and questions in the chat. And for those watching this in the future, this is what life was like in 2016 on a October evening.
a very quaint, difficult existence.
Yes. Yeah, I do wonder, like if you dig up paper or manuscripts, you're pretty sure, like, this is authentic for the most part. They don't get questioned. Like, who keeps track of all their computer files and stuff, and what a mess, like, archaeologists have in the future.
Right, for sure.
To deal with.
Well,
Which is,
I was going to say, I remember studying archaeology in college. And there's one day where he was explaining, you know how when cavemen, when they're like making stone tools, they got their one tool and then the tool that they're making, the rock that they're making the tool out of. And every flake that comes off of that rock is called a waste flake. And so there will be hundreds or maybe even thousands of waste flakes that come off of this tool as it goes from round to becoming a spearhead or whatever it's going to be. Mm-hmm. And archaeologists pick up and label every waste flake. So they have to paint it with white paint so that they can write on it, and they write a serial number for that waste flake, and then they log its location. And it was at that moment I thought, I don't want to be an archaeologist. This is like, and that's what they would have to do. You'd have archaeologists going through old floppy disks, like labeling each little, file, credit card bills or email or whatever it is. And yeah, it would be boring for a very special kind of brain, I think.
Waste flakes. Well, that's interesting. You did archaeology because we'll kind of come full circle, I think, with a little bit of that field in some ways with some of the stuff you're doing now.
Yeah,
but,
totally.
First of all, tell me, Pat, how is it that you ended up or actually got started in gaming? And I think it's been for quite a while now from what we've chatted about too.
Yeah, I was in 79 and I was 11 years old. And you know how when you're a kid, basically what you're interested in has a lot to do with what the people in the neighborhood are interested in, because you don't have a car. It's like you're going to have common interests with the neighbor kids. And so I was really lucky that way, that the neighbor kids didn't just like sports, but also were kind of smart, nerdy kids, So yeah, we played kickball and stickball and, and all that other stuff. But we all played Dungeons and Dragons. And I guess before D&D, I had played some Avalon Hill games, Starship Troopers and Axis and Allies and that sort of thing. But then, you got some of those on your shelf there. Oh, that's the one.
Unpunched. Unpunched.
With the, oh, sweet. That's so cool. That really got me going, with the DAP and the dark, like the different equipment you could put on the Terrans. That was the first inkling I got of what it was like to maybe equip individual guys and think of them as individual people, But then D&D came along, and I was, like I said, I was 11. There was a kid in the neighborhood who was English. And so it was magical. It felt like it came from a foreign land, even though it was Wisconsin.
Wisconsin, yeah.
Yeah. But he was showing us how to play with the old Holmes box set, and I was completely captivated, man. I really got enthralled with it immediately, and shortly thereafter bought the AD&D books, which were out at that time. and started running games and have been playing really ever since. And I bounced around. You know, I played some Twilight 2000 and like Dark Conspiracy and some other stuff. But D&D has always been kind of the spine of it, and that's where I started with the B1 module and Search of the Unknown.
Would you say as you kept up in the hobby, did you end up DMing more? Did you like playing more?
Yeah.
Did it just depend, or?
Yeah, the DMing bounced around among kind of 3 guys in the neighborhood, but it became more and more that I would do it, you know. And I think, you know, I always had a vision kind of for how things should look and how they should be. And I don't know, maybe it's a controlling aspect of my personality. I don't know, but I love the world building part of it and sort of being the ringleader of the fun, you know. Yeah. So I found myself dungeon mastering more and more.
There's times too on the player side where it's like, you know, I don't have anything on the line except doing what I want and maybe messing with the DM a little bit too.
Right.
So sometimes that can be refreshing to get on the other side of the table.
Oh, sure. I mean, yeah, the DM has all the homework, man. I mean, yeah, there's so much preparation that has to go into it if if you're doing a good job. All the guys like Frank Mentzer are geniuses at improvising, and you know, they could show up with nothing and still give you a great game. But yeah, I was always hyper prepared. And yeah, the game I'm in right now, well, there's one that I run with my friends back in Ohio, but that's only 3 or 4 times a year at best. And the one I play here, I'm just a player. And the game master is amazing, the kind of things he prepares. So I'm spoiled that way. I just show up with my character sheet, and it's 4.5 hours of fun. I get in my car and go home, you know. That's it. But yeah, our game master here, he does a thing where he creates Photoshop maps. And we have a big screen TV laying flat on the table, and he can put the grid on it and everything. And when a fireball goes off, he can just lay in the radius of it, and we can see who's affected. And yeah, it's really amazing. It's real next level kind of stuff.
So you're in the tender young age of 10, 11, playing the Holmes box set.
Right.
Did this kind of go through high school, or where did gaming sort of take you as your career in becoming a actor and director and writer and all these different things you've done later? How did you keep gaming with you, keep the torch burning?
Well, I think it's not hard, really. It's not hard like in high school, certainly, because your friends are all still there. In college, it gets a little bit more difficult unless you find a group in college. So I didn't play as much in college, only when I came home for the holidays and stuff with my regular group. And then when I was done with school and was on the road, I was home. You know, I was back every week. You know, I'd go on the road and come back, and so there'd be those couple of days, and we would always play then. So yeah, I kept it up. I mean, it was really consistent. Some people drift away from the game for a while, but I pretty much had a through line from age 11 to right now of kind of unbroken play. And yeah, one of the cool things, when I started as a stand-up comedian, this was pretty much right out of college, I was on the road, you know, driving all over the Midwest. My home base was in Dayton, Ohio. And the Midwest is the hub of the tabletop gaming world. So there are all these amazing game stores. At every city I went to, the first thing I would do is get the yellow pages out of the hotel drawer and be like, games, you know, and there were some incredible game stores. I mean, of course, the market now has imploded some from the internet. You know, a lot of those stores have just gone for good. But boy, man, in the early 90s, stores.
In Dayton, did you go to Origins then growing up? Because I think they've been maybe always, but in Dayton for a long time, right? The gaming convention?
Yeah, they're in Columbus. Yeah, so
Columbus.
I went up there a handful of times, and I remember meeting Stefan Pokorny back when he was really kind of first starting. You know, it was interesting thinking back on that conversation. You know, now there's a movie about him, and he's, you know, got this I don't want to call it an empire because that's maybe a little too pretentious, but a massive enterprise that he's built that has really given a lot of people a lot of fun, you know. But yeah, there were local game conventions in Dayton that we would go to also, and then periodically, you know, we'd get out to Gen Con. But I was never a big convention guy as much as kind of playing at home and in the game stores and whatnot.
Yeah. Now, so you do stand up, and then you got a gig then in Hollywood, right?
Yeah.
What did you start doing specific things before the seasons you did on Mad TV, or was that one of the big ones that brought you out to Hollywood? Or
Well, yeah, when things are different now. I mean, Instagram following and that sort of thing tends to be more important than sort of your reputation as a road comedian. But back then, I started as an opening act and sleeping on couches and whatever, and moved up to feature act, who's usually the middle guy in the show, and then the headliner. And by my third or fourth year, I was headlining, and usually one of the axioms that always said was you shouldn't just decide to go to Los Angeles. You should wait until people are telling you. So when people say you should be in LA, that's when it's time to go. And that's what started happening. People are like, you need to get yourself out to Los Angeles. And I love the Midwest, so that was a really tough decision. But there was a management company that offered me representation, so I moved out to LA, and it was tough. I mean, it wasn't like there was stuff waiting for me. I spent a year out there before I got an agent, and then I was auditioning, I think, for a year before I booked anything. So you got 2 full years there, just having no idea whether you're going to succeed at all. And like gradually accruing debt, and, living in a squalorous kind of apartment, and, and you got other friends who are like, I just made a down payment on my house. And you're thinking, oh, what am I doing with my life? But yeah, then I started getting a couple of commercials here and there. I did commercials for like Tostitos and Budweiser and 7-Eleven and Sherwin-Williams, some other stuff. And what happens is when people start recognizing your face, they're more comfortable with casting you and stuff, and so if they recognize me from the commercials, then they'll stick me in an episode of Arliss or Seinfeld or whatever it is. And it was a couple of guest star roles later that I got Mad TV. It was actually the same casting director who put me in Mad TV, or no, the casting director from Seinfeld later was put in charge of Mad TV, and so he remembered me and brought me back.
Okay.
And, that was really exciting. Obviously, to be on TV every week was pretty cool.
Yes, for the uninitiated, Mr. Patrick Kilbane is Bizarro Kramer.
Yes.
From Seinfeld, and it's funny. It always tricks me. It's such like a New York show of like how it's all set, but it's all shot in Los Angeles. I thought, right?
Yeah. They're on the CBS lot. They've got a New York street. And it's kind of just one little row. It's kind of just one little street, and then maybe a little kind of V that comes off of it. But that's it. It's not some gigantic like universal backlot like they had back in the 40s or something. It's just kind of a little street. And so, that's where we shot the Bizarro Showdown, and that's where they did all the outside cafe scenes and stuff. And it was, very cool, obviously, but not as grandiose as you might think it would be.
Now they say never meet your heroes, and you have yet to crush or disappoint me because you're a gentleman scholar, and Stan the Java Man was my favorite growing up on Mad TV, and I'm 6'6", and I think you're close to that. I'm
6'5". Yeah, I was just thinking that we should probably get matching Noel costumes at some point.
Hey, I'm up for it. If you're going back to BrigadeCon, I'm up for it.
Just run around with like furs on our shoulders and like dog headdresses and stuff. Yeah. Pretty awesome.
but so this is the question I'm afraid to ask.
Yeah.
I imagine like on set or in someone's dressing room on Mad TV, you and Will Sasso and Phil Lamar like rolling dice and playing D&D, but I'll cover my eyes. You say yes, and just shake your head if it's not true, or but either way, that's what I imagine was happening. But
right, that it was all about D&D. Yes, just as soon as we wrapped on Friday night, it was right to D&D, man. Yeah, every time. It's like we drove right by the Sky Bar on Sunset Boulevard and said, "No, we're not going to party right now. We're going to game. Who's got a basement?"
Well, I think this is a great interview. Thank you for being with us. Well, but in all seriousness, how did your gaming life do during those times? Did it have to take a back seat for a while, or
Sure.
do you want to out any celebrity D&D players that are out there?
Let's see. I mean, I don't think I would be able to name any that you don't know already. But yeah, it's funny. I mean, back when I was doing Mad TV, I remember Phil Lamar was hugely into comic books, and now he does all the conventions, and he's a huge voiceover personality
Yeah,
and all that stuff. But back then, it was like really kind of eccentric nerd stuff. I mean, it was really fringe, and now it's so mainstream, and
yeah.
all of television is like, and film is comic books. And it's just so funny seeing that seed of it there, and yeah, I had always wanted to write games and have a game store. And actually, in 2004, I opened a game store in my hometown. It's in Kettering, Ohio, just a little bit north of Centerville, where I grew up. And it was probably a bad idea. I thought that I could run it from Los Angeles. I would just get friends and people I trusted to run the place, and I would come back every month or so and do the books and make sure everything was squared away. And it was a lot tougher than that. I mean, if you want a game store, even back then, you have to curate it like a Japanese garden. You got to be on your hands and knees with the inventory, picking the weeds, and making sure everything's watered and flourishing. And yeah, I wasn't there to do that. And yeah, I was shooting like Semi-Pro and Meet Dave and some other films I did at the time. And eventually I ended up selling the place to a guy that worked for me, and he did a great job with it. He actually had it for another three or 4 years, maybe even longer. So I'm really proud of having created a local game store and to have it persist for that many years, even when it was, in someone else's hands. It was a kind of a dream come true, if not a great business decision. It was really cool though. I think we had like 6,000 square feet. It was really big, and 2,000 square feet in the back was all dedicated to game space. With all the tables and the terrain, and that's where the restrooms were, and soda machines and everything. It was a great spot to hang out. But I may have missed your question there. Yeah, as far as gaming, like while I've been in Hollywood, there hasn't been a lot, and I think there's been more in the last 4 or 5 years because it's easier to find people and stuff. But other than that, I had largely been playing, just when I got back to the Midwest and saw my regular group of friends. But yeah, now I'm happily in 2 different groups, and one meets every other week, one meets every week, and yeah, really get my fix. It's pretty awesome.
Well, I knew you were big into gaming. The more I've seen the work you've been doing and gotten to know you, but the game store thing, that's like that. You're really serious about it. So moving on topic with that, you've got your YouTube channel, Dorks of Yore.
Yeah.
And you've got another project, the RPG History Project.
Correct.
I'd love to hear more about both of those, and to tell the audience about it. And audience, if you have questions for Pat, throw them into the comments, and we can get them out there.
Totally. Yeah. Well, the RPG History Project, the idea there is to create an archive of interviews, especially with the early pioneers of tabletop role playing. And when you think about Dave Arneson, Gary Gygax, these kind of pillars of basically the creators of a multi-billion-dollar industry. Not to mention something that has inspired many millions of people and brought a lot of friendship and fun into people's lives. But those guys are gone now, and we don't have great HD, high-quality interviews of them. I keep thinking that how much fun it would be to have a 3-hour interview with Gary Gygax. You could just sit and kind of pick up on his nuances and get a sense of who he was and all those kind of things. And the great thing is there are still a lot of amazing storytellers who were part of that massive growth there in the early 70s. And what we're trying to do is make sure that we find them and talk to them, let them tell their stories and be themselves on camera, and have that for game enthusiasts for generations to come to be able to enjoy and see the roots of the hobby. And oh, go ahead.
So we're left with more than just waste flakes of 2-second video clips, right?
Totally, man. Yeah, waste. Yeah, that's exactly the analogy. And in some ways, well, I guess there's a difference somewhat. I was going to say John Peterson, author of Playing at the World, has been in the business kind of collecting waste flakes, but I guess
seriously.
I guess they're waste flakes insofar as they're very hard to find and very studiously cataloged, but I think they're much more treasures, like old fanzines and stuff that he finds from 40 years ago are just amazing, and he very meticulously reads them and catalogs things, and actually I should give him credit that the RPG History Project is inspired by Playing at the World, that having read his book and seeing the care and professionalism that he gave to something that I've always loved, but never, or I shouldn't say never, but often doesn't get the kind of respect that it should, and here's a guy who comes along and gives it scholarly levels of respect. And reading that book, I read it cover to cover, and thousands of things underlined. It gave me so much gratification, and it's also validating. It made me feel validated in my love for this game. This is a real phenomenon, and it does have a rich, amazing history. And so I thought, video and film, that's the toolbox that I'm trained to work with. And so I figured if I'm going to give something to the gaming community, it's going to be with the tools that I understand. So it's going to be video and film.
So the RPG History Project, the way you are helping to fund this piece is you've opened a Patreon within the last week or two, I believe.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, we call it kind of a soft launch because we haven't done press releases and that sort of thing. But yeah, we talked about it on Facebook and your podcasts and whatnot. That's how we're hoping to gradually build a following and funding to be able to do a much more robust job of creating this archive.
Well, there's a link to it in the description. I was very impressed with the approach you're taking. I mean, it's a lot better than this Mickey Mouse operation of me sitting in my basement, and you're actually like in front of a real like rack of like all your miniature stuff here. But anyhow, it's very cool the work that you're doing, and as I've heard your heart on it, you just want to share this and get this out there. There's a song that I've heard before called "When All Our Legends Are Gone," and it's about all these classic country artists. It's kind of Dale Watson is a singer, and I've heard it a couple times. But it's been weird as he keeps playing this song. More and more of those people he's singing about that were alive when he wrote it are gone. Wow. The question of what are we going to do when all our legends are gone? And I just have the utmost respect for the time, attention, and care that I've seen at BrigadeCon and that you're putting online, that you've been putting into telling these stories and making sure we're not left with the waste flakes of you're saying, oh, well, if you dig to page 36 of this forum, he said this that one time, and like that's all we're left with. So well, thanks
Nathan. I appreciate that. And it's funny that we kind of take for granted that people like Dave Wesley and Tim Kask and those guys are still around. We can still play with them and talk to them and to have them tell us stories at conventions, and it is so cool. But we think of that as kind of a fixture of a con. It's like, well, those guys will be there. Well, they won't always be there. And that's I hope those guys both live until they're 100. I'm not saying that there's anything imminent, about those two guys in particular, but they're two guys that gave me a lot of joy at BrigadeCon this year, and to think about conventions without them. Whenever in 20 years or something, those originators won't be there. And at least to be able to have the video to go back and look at, I think would be cool. Yeah.
Well, we'll come back to that in a minute. A couple questions we have in the chat here. One of them is from Barker, who is one of the organizers of BrigadeCon. He asks, of all the characters you've played, which is your favorite?
Wow. That's a good question. There's different kinds of favorites. Like in semi-pro, my role wasn't big, but it was a bad guy, and I like playing bad guys. I don't know why, man. I like playing comedic bad guys, and in that one, I was playing the guy who knocks out Will Ferrell. And when Will Ferrell is in his coma or state of unconsciousness, he has a vision of the alley-oop. And that's what ends up winning the day for his basketball team, in the ABA there. And so, I had to be just this nasty fist fighter of a basketball player. And that's not my disposition, really,
I've met you, and that's like the complete opposite. So.
Yeah. I could kind of make the angry face real well, and I can, scream and holler pretty good. And
the mustache helped too.
Yes,
mustache
right? Totally. Yeah, the Manchu mustache. It puts a little bit of an edge on me. But there was a guy, Peter something. He was 6'11" or 7 feet tall, so big guy. And he said to me after one take, we were doing a fight scene. We're just improvising this little scrum underneath the hoop. And he said, "Man, when you turned on me, I thought you were gonna kill me." I thought, man, he could pull my arms off like an insect if he wanted to. And just the fact that I convinced him that somehow I was dangerous to him, it made me feel really good. But on My Name Is Earl, I played a world champion grocery bagger. It was kind of a bad guy, a la Karate Kid, and he had a real nasty disposition, and that was fun. But I was a zombie in Day of the Dead. I was the boss fight in the remake of Day of the Dead. And I got to tear people's heads off and, wrestle and fight people. And I was incinerated at the end by a jet flame. So I guess there are a number of highlights, and all of them are cool for different reasons. But
did you play evil alignments a lot then in your games, or?
No, not at all. No, I almost always was lawful. And even now, my character in my weekly game is a paladin, and I'm just I'm always spoiling for a righteous kind of fight, and always willing to die. It's like, if I got to die right here, man, fine. This is where
or let others die for the cause because it's the right thing as a paladin, right?
Right.
Like on your party.
Yes, exactly.
Pick the fight just because it's the right thing to do. Or
right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, totally. Not always popular.
Someone says, "Isn't knocking out Will Ferrell everyone's dream?"
Yeah, well, that's interesting. Yeah, he was called a couple of years ago the most overpaid actor in Hollywood, and he had a couple of bombs, I guess. Semi-Pro actually didn't do great. It was after Blades of Glory had done hugely well. Everyone thought Semi-Pro would be big because it's a more popular sport, but that was kind of the beginning of sort of a downslide. But when they called him one of the most overpaid actors in Hollywood, he said, "Yeah, I must have succeeded then. Everybody's goal out here is to be overpaid." So he took that real well. But he's a great guy, by the way. Not everybody is a great guy, especially the superstars. Will is like truly a very nice, kind of thoughtful guy. You'd like him. All the Minnesota folks would probably like Will Ferrell.
Oh yeah, we like those tall folks a lot here.
Yeah.
Another question: what's your favorite game system or edition? If we want to get into the edition wars here, pick a Jerry Springer style internet fight to get
right. Yeah. Gosh, man, that's a tough call, and kind of like with the favorite role thing, there are different editions that mean different things to me. Like first edition AD&D is, that's where I spent the many thousands of hours poring over the books and being influenced as a teenager, and so that'll always have a special place in my heart. Fifth edition, I think, is a lot of fun. I think they've done some cool things with it, and I think I prefer it to 3.5, which is the last stop, where I'd spent a great deal of time. But I don't know, it almost seems to me like somewhere in between would be good. I'm not crazy about having a ton of special racial ability, like the combination of what you get for your race and what you get for your class and what you can pick up in feats. It just makes for, and you combine that with spells, and you're just looking at the pages of your character sheet, missing things sometimes. And I feel like it becomes more of an account keeping exercise than it is role playing. It's like the longer your sheet is, the less you're thinking like a person, and more you're thinking like the master of this inventory of special abilities. You know, so I guess I would say first edition, mostly for great nostalgia, and it was also well crafted. And then I would say fifth would be another favorite. Yeah.
It's almost like you listen to different styles of music, or at least me, like I like different styles. And if I'm listening to punk or ska, I think about being in high school. And if I'm listening to something else, I'm thinking about, the nostalgia of the different people you played with and you were with and all that kind of.
Yeah, totally. Actually, though, when I run games with my buddies at home, and some of them are the same people I played with when I was 11, so it's really awesome having that.
Wow.
30-plus year continuity. It's really fun. But I run a homebrew system that's based on the scientific stuff that I talk about in those RPG science episodes. So you know how anyone who's seen the RPG science episodes we have up, I'm really big into the science that goes behind role-playing game mechanics. And so I incorporate all of that stuff into a homebrew system, and that's what we usually play when I run the games at home.
So here's a question. You talked about bookkeeping that you have to do with a character sheet in some of the crunchier systems. You also talked about literal bookkeeping you had to do running a game store.
Sure.
For your homebrew, I mean, you put the research in. What's your DM style? Are you sort of just, you go with it? You want to have a lot of this laid out for the players, or the dice rolls behind the screen? How would you describe your style as a DM when you're running games?
Well, I do like to heavily prepare, so there is a lot of improvisation, but I feel like what people don't know a lot about sketch improv is that there's preparation that goes into that. You have things that are sort of your go-tos that you can pull out that look like masterful improvisation, but are actually kind of from your reservoir of prepared, things. But so I like to be well prepared and can improvise within the paradigm of what I've created. And I like the research, I like building, the organizations of that world, and the weather, and the, kind of the rules by which the world is governed. And the more thoroughly you flesh that out, the more realistically you can improvise things, the more everything sort of has an internal consistency and makes sense. And it's funny, I never did, for all my abilities as an impressionist and stuff, I never did much in the way of role-playing NPCs and that sort of thing years ago, but I'm doing more of it now, and it's kind of created an interesting blend, from my more narrative storytelling style to the performance role-playing part of it.
I feel like for people where this hobby has grabbed a hold of them, one of the big reasons is if you think about the Venn diagrams with the overlapping circles,
sure,
there's so many opportunities for like what I'm hearing you say. You had an interest in history, and you like to improv, and the science part is cool, and it's a friendship thing, and it's social, and all those things are kind of like different layers that can really make it such a rewarding hobby. Even with, we were chatting off air about the miniatures you painted. That's a whole nother, that could be just a hobby of just painting stuff. And it's only one small slice. So
totally.
So
totally.
That's one of the rewarding things that I found, and one of the headaches for my wife and children having me in their life is that I'm always getting pulled into these circles.
Right.
But it hits so many of the things that I enjoy at once.
Totally.
So it's cool to see you doing projects like Dorks of Yore and the RPG history piece, where you're really sharing the love with the world.
Right. Yeah.
My daughter asked me the other day, or she told me, she said, well, I want to be a part of history, Dad, which is very profound for a first grader. And I said, you know what? I know how you can always be a part of history. Well, how's that, Dad? I said, find a way to serve or help as many people as you can, and you'll be a part of history. I said, anybody. She said, Albert Einstein. and I said his scientific theories and stuff changed the world and how we understand the world. He helped tons of people. So that's one of the things that I love to see, guys like you and Stormberg and Peterson with his books, guys like Dave Wesley who are willing to just chat and share.
Absolutely.
You know, it's so easy to, and this isn't anything against players, but you know, it's easy to just sit in the player chair. But for those of us that we find that reward in doing more with the game, one of the most rewarding things is finding a way to share it, which is one of the reasons I'm so glad we can have this conversation on the internet right now and share it for whoever might enjoy that also in the future.
Yeah, totally. And you brought up Paul Stormberg, and boy, that guy does some amazing work. I mean, the effort that he goes to recreate kind of an original style sand table. Yeah. I mean, how many hundreds of pounds of sand? Is that 1,000 pounds of sand? I mean, it's a lot, man. And the whole Dave Sutherland display that he put up with all the original artifacts and original artwork. And I mean, it's a great deal of effort, and it's not like he's being paid 40 grand, to haul that stuff, across state lines. It's like, it's purely out of the joy that he gets out of it and the joy that it brings to other people. And it's really fun to see. And it's funny, you brought up the idea of sharing the things, and if you're a writer or if you like to paint models or whatever it is, that can be a meditation for you at your desk. But when you're using those things to play, then you have an audience. You know what I mean? It's like suddenly you have an audience for all this stuff that you've created. And as a model builder, it's great pulling a terrain piece out, that helps tell the story and everybody's eyes get a little bit big. And, it kind of paints the picture for them as to what's happening in the adventure. And certainly when you spend a lot of time crafting a dungeon, with the narrative and the characters and everything, you have an audience and you can share all that joy. And I never made that connection until you're talking about it now. With RPG science and these archival type videos, it's the same. It's the same thing. It's just like expanding the size of my table. Just reaching a larger number of players. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, and sometimes too, I guess in defense again of just the player, there are times where it's just such a great needed escape, where I can tell people off in character and nobody questions it, and you get to express a whole different side of yourself. And in some ways it I don't know, would you say your years of gaming has changed you as a person, and in what ways?
Yeah, I think so for sure. And it's funny when people talk about the benefits of role-playing games, a lot of times they discuss more superficial things like, social skills and math skills and, your ability to write and craft language and all that. And all those are important things. But for me, I think that the deeper level of it is of mythological importance. And I could really go down a rabbit hole on you. I'll be careful here. But, Joseph Campbell writes about mythology.
Wait, I got Joseph Campbell.
Oh, okay, you're with me. Sweet. What do you got there?
The power of myth. The power of myth on hand.
Bravo.
But I've got some other ones too. I'll let you keep talking.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, that's a good one, man. Yeah, and I watch those videos when I work out, and my copy of Power of Myth is heavily underlined and stuff. But you know how he talks about the purposes of mythology and how it can connect you to the mystical world and make you understand that the world is bigger and than just what we see. And also that the pedagogical aspect, he calls it, it teaches you about like the stages of life and like getting through tough transitions and stuff. There are lessons in mythology that speak to us unconsciously that teach us how to get across thresholds in our lives. And, the way that people use mythology to train themselves unconsciously, I think role-playing games do the same thing. I think that we learn through role-playing games on a deep level, not just academic, but a deep level, how to get over hurdles, how to sort of crack out of your cocoon and become a different, greater thing than you were, just a month or a year before. And I really value that ability that they have. And I don't know if the creators knew, the creators of the game, not the creators of the universe, the creators of the game knew when they were making it that it would have that kind of an effect. And I actually sat down for our documentary project with Robert Walter, who's the director of the Joseph Campbell Foundation. He's a mythologist and obviously knew Joseph Campbell personally, and was talking about the symbolism of a dungeon, the symbolism of a dragon, and their relationship to the unconscious mind. And it's deep, man. I mean, it's really heavy stuff, and it doesn't have to be. I mean, you can just play for fun and have it be silly, but man, if you really play into it, there's a real benefit that you can get out of it. And I feel like I've been a beneficiary of that kind of deep mechanic.
I think, is it Carl Jung that talked about the shadow self?
Yes. Yeah.
And I think one of the other well, it sounds weird to say opportunities, but one of the things I've found is it gives people a safe place to explore those shadow sides of ourselves.
Absolutely.
Or think how we'd react. In one of the games I play, I'm a sleazy bard. And it's so not who I usually am, but it's just interesting to stretch yourself. Barker, who asked a question earlier, we played diplomacy on Facebook, play by mail, so like you message back and forth and make a move once a week. But cool. Man, it is so hard because it stretches me because I'm so non-confrontational in real life.
Right.
One of the things I've enjoyed is it's putting me in this position where like I'm gonna have to make and break deals, and but it's in a safe way too. So again, that's another Venn diagram of strangely even self-improvement or just getting to know yourself more, the explored life versus the unexplored life. So speaking of Barker and some of the other folks, we had another question here that I think kind of comes back to what we were talking about earlier, which is, what are some of your goals for the Dorks of Yore in the next year or so? The Timcast recording was extremely well done and organized, so we want more.
Great. Well, yeah, thank you, whoever you are. I appreciate it.
Slinger.
What's that?
Rune Slinger is he has a YouTube channel also here. So
cool. I'll have to check it out. Yeah, we've got a bunch of stuff already recorded that is ready to be cut into webisodes and rolled out. And I think we're going to do it in a similar way, where we're going to create small, shareable, short subject videos, and then after a period of time, we'll put out the entire interview. But one of the tricky things is that we're also creating a documentary feature. And so we don't want to step on our own toes, releasing the footage that we're going to use in the feature film in the form of the long form interview. So yeah, it's on the way. We've got a lot of great stuff already recorded with Luke Gygax and John Peterson and Dave Wesley. And we're going to be sitting down with Steve Perrin, the co-creator of RuneQuest, next week. And we sat down with Lee and Barry Gold, the creator of Alarms and Excursions, and they had stories about sort of the fan culture from 40 years ago that's just incredible. So yeah, there is more of that on the way, and I think as soon as next week we're going to have short episodes coming out. I haven't chosen which interview we're going to be drawing from, but next week RuneSlinger should see some of that.
Awesome. Well, and one of the ways too to see some of those things ahead of time is through the Patreon levels of subscribing to, which is really cool, and a great way to help support the project and the work that you're doing, and nice perks of seeing some of these things a little bit earlier too, which is pretty awesome. So yeah, there's early access and some things, some access you'll get as a supporter, that stuff that won't make the Facebook page ever, or perhaps just much later. Yeah. Another question in here. I think this one might be from Barker too. For the many content creators in our community, the name BrigadeCon comes from RPG Brigade, which is the YouTube RPG Brigade. A number of us that have kind of found each other in the last number of years. This keeps growing and growing of people that have YouTube channels. So he says,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's been fun to see the convention grow every year too. But he says for the many content creators in our community, what sort of Obi-Wan level wisdom might you impart on us, good sir?
Boy, I wouldn't want to put myself on that level. I know there are guys out there who have been making stuff a lot longer than I have. So I don't want to put myself forth as some kind of a guru. But I think just as an artist, I would say that the more of yourself and your personal interest you put into it, the better. The closer you get to the thing that you truly love the most, the better off you are. So it's funny with RPG Science. I was nervous about putting that out. Like the first episode, I'm like, are people going to hate this? I really had no idea. And I knew people were enjoying the Tim Kask videos and the historical part of it, but I didn't know if it would just create a lot of arguments or But the science is the one thing about this game that I dig more than anything. It's like where I really drill down is on the science of it. When I go to Starbucks, I've got a binder full of scientific studies, and I've got a ruler and a pen. And I'm underlining things about the allometric growth of animals and, injury biomechanics, how much force it takes to break a rib or a skull. I study sports science, how much strength it takes to swing an implement to a certain speed. Then that turns into a certain speed, turns into a certain force, which then you can look at the injury biomechanics, and now you know how much a mace does to an ogre. It's like you could figure it all out. But that's the stuff I love the most, and there's a danger there. If you put something out that's really close to your heart and people hate it, it's going to kind of sting, I think. And that's probably why I was nervous about putting it out there. But it's been, really just the 3 episodes we've done have been really popular, and it's been really encouraging the way people have responded. So that's what I would say. If there's one sliver of the game that interests you more than anything else, really drill down on that thing that you really love and make that the thing that you talk about.
In terms of putting yourself out there, one of the things, I think when I was in the 7th grade in my junior high, I was in the science club, which was also a great abstinence program. And and as I look back, and I'm not proud of it, but it's funny in the fact that, like, we even had a hierarchy of coolness in the science club, and like
Right.
some kids we kind of weren't as nice to as other ones.
Sure.
I think one of the things, with certain exceptions, if you're going to put something out there that's a love of the game, even if it's something you don't necessarily agree with, I've found, whether it's terrain building or people that are really trying to put something of their heart out there, you really don't see a ton of trolling, because again, it's like we're all in the science club here. Like,
Right. Yes. Right. Yeah, this is a locked basement. The football team is somewhere else.
Yeah.
It's just a little nerdarchy. And what's funny is I think there's actually kind of an opposite. There's like an opposite response where the real anger comes if somebody's sort of an outsider, either pretending, that they enjoy it when they don't really, or or somebody who's making fun. Those people get kicked out the door really pretty quick.
And then as you were talking about being at Starbucks with scientific studies, I'm just thinking, like, to apply the adjective of thug to that. That's as like geek thug as you get, where it's like, I'm so into this game, I'm reading real world scientific sports stats about the nerdiest game ever.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm glad you bought the starter set.
Right. Yeah, totally. Yeah, just a total gangsta. You got to be careful about that, because I don't begrudge anybody's enjoyment of the game on any level. So it's all in good fun. But yeah, man, I wonder sometimes if I'm not pathological in how far down I'm drilling. That's another reason I think I'm glad to see John Peterson's book. It's like, okay, this guy really went all the way. If he can go all the way, then I think I can too with this crazy science stuff.
Yeah. Well, let's see. It's winding down a little bit in the comments. I wonder. All right, if you're up for it, we did talk about doing something a little off the wall here.
Sure,
Which
man.
would be, I can take the role of DM if you want. I can take the role of Bob Ross, the DM, because I
Oh,
think I can do
wow.
an okay Bob Ross DM. And then
Okay.
you had some impressions that you were going to do.
Okay.
And we'll just on the fly see how this goes. If you're up for a few minutes here.
Yeah, you tell me who.
Okay, here we go.
You tell me who you want to respond.
Hey there, I thought today we'd start with just a great dungeon scene. Let me set it up for you. There's this mountain here, right up here, just kind of wisps down out of the clouds there. It's just a great day. This is my world. You're in my world as a DM. And I thought today that we'd send this party into this hellscape of a dungeon here. There's lava, there's sulfur, and it's going to make y'all choke a little bit. But, you know,
But it's happy
okay.
lava.
But it's happy lava, and we're gonna beat the devil out of this cavern here. Okay, so as your party enters here, the three of y'all, you notice that there's a squirrel. There's a squirrel, but he ain't no happy squirrel. This is a squirrel bear, not like an owl bear, but this is a squirrel bear. And the first of you in line here, Mr. Howard Stern, he sees you coming. How do you want to react to this, Mr. Stern?
Okay, it's a squirrel bear. Is it like human size or like is it the size of a squirrel or the size of a bear? Because that's going to definitely materially affect the way that I respond to this thing. So I've got a sword. If it's the size of a squirrel, I'm going to cut it in half. If it's the size of a bear, I might keep my distance and see if I can't hit it with my bow.
Well, that's the issue here. Is that y'all got a bear-sized squirrel bear, but he also has his minions of squirrel-sized bears too. So it's kind of both.
Are any of them topless? If there are any topless squirrel bears, I'm going to try to make eye contact immediately with them.
Well, I'd say you can maybe use some infravision to see beyond their fur cloak with the infrared spectrum. Happy little infrared.
Perfect.
Spectrum.
I like that.
So you're going to approach Mr. Gary Busey. How about you? What do you want to do with this legion of squirrel bears?
I'm actually very happy to see squirrel bears because I've seen squirrel bears before in my sleep. Like I wake up in the middle of the night and I see over by my nightstand a squirrel bear with a bow, and he's dressed like an Indian chieftain. He takes a shot at me and the arrow whistles right by my ear. And I know then that I've been touched by the spirit world. But every squirrel bear and every being in the world I see as having a rainbow around their shoulders. And so for that reason, as a being of love and light, I'm going to embrace these squirrel bears and take them to Texas and teach them how to ride a horse backwards.
Sadly, I think he's said that in real life.
These are direct quotes from The Apprentice or whatever.
And lastly, one of your party, you're a roguish figure. Do you have any ideas? Do you want to try a backstab or anything, Mr. Sean Connery, on this army of squirrel bears?
Well, let's see here. Am I good at sneaking up? So I think I'll go ahead and roll a d20 and see if I can't get behind them. And if I'm able to, then I'll go ahead and stab the biggest one right in the back. Wait, do I have a gun?
Sure, we'll introduce black powder into this campaign. We'll kind of cross genre this thing. It's my world. I can do what I want.
Because if he has a knife, if he has a knife, you pull the gun. That's my theory. So I'll pull my gun, get behind him, and hopefully roll a nice 20.
Okay, let's see here. You had an excellent roll, Mr. Connery. And as this squirrel bear shouts or growls and kind of squeaks at the same time with his squirrel bear noises, he falls to the ground. Do you have anything you need to say to him as he's meeting his doom?
I'll just tell him that he's a pansy and he deserves exactly what he got.
I can't top that. Oh, thank you so much for going out on a limb here. I think that could be actually a fun little parody setting we could do here with celebrity dungeon crawling with squirrel bears in the Legion.
That would be cool. We could animate it or something. That would be perfect.
Yeah. So, Pat, tell us some of the best ways to keep up with you and what you're up to, and yeah, and anything else you want to leave us here in the last few minutes here.
Yeah, I guess go to our Patreon, which is patreon.com/dorksofyore. And our Facebook page is where we really do our fan building and communicating. So facebook.com/dorksofyore is where we are there. And yeah, please support us, even if it's just sharing the videos or liking or commenting. Come hang around and speak your piece, and we'd love to have you.
Awesome. And final question before we go off air here.
Totally.
What do you hope for? What do you long for the legacy of your contribution to the gaming community be when you look back? What's something that you hope to see happen through the work that you're doing? Not the waste flakes. What's the real stone tool you want to leave behind?
Yeah, interesting. I think the two things would be the archive and a documentary that is really well told. Documentaries can be sort of factual in their presentation. This will be factual, obviously, but some just move you more with the way that the story is told. And I want a documentary that people watch and gamers feel nostalgic for and energized by, and people who don't know the game and the gaming community are intrigued by and can somehow better understand gaming and gamers as a result of having watched it. And for the archive, yeah, just for anyone who so loves the game, they want to start digging and learning more, they have a place to go, So those, I guess, would be the things.
Fantastic. And I wanted to give you one last thanks. I've gotten to know you a little bit over the last year here, but growing up around my science club days, I shot up really tall.
Sure.
And I had a nickname I didn't ask for.
Okay.
TF, which didn't stand for tall friend. It standed for something else. And it's the worst. That age is it is the worst. But I remember watching Mad TV with my older brother, and he'd be like, "Hey, that guy, he's hilarious. He's tall like you are." And as sappy as it might sound, when I saw you and then when I'd see you towering over the other actors and just doing these hilarious characters, Stan or Sean Connery or any of them that you were in, I would always feel inspired that, like, you know what,
wow.
I'm going to be okay.
Oh, that's awesome, man.
There's a place for tall people. And then to top it off, I meet you at BrigadeCon and get to do an interview like this. So this is just fantastic. So I personally wanted to just deeply say thank you for the years of stuff you've been doing, and the future, as Paul Stormberg would say, future's bright. I think you're doing great work, and it's a huge contribution to the community. And thank you for taking time out of your evening before you go to a Halloween party, right?
That's correct,
Now, are you going in costume?
No. I think there's some, you sort of become inoculated to wanting to be in costume after doing like sketch shows and stuff.
Yeah, like I suppose.
Because then you think of that as work, and for other people it's play, but no, it just feels like work. But I don't want to be dismissive of what you just said. I really appreciate that, and I feel the same way. It's funny when you see somebody who kind of looks like you in some way. It does open a door of possibility and sort of makes you, I don't know, it gives you permission in some ways to do things. Like, I know a lot of tall guys kind of try to hide, they sort of try to, get small in a room because we stick out like sore thumbs. But yeah, one of the things I did as a comedian was really get silly. I mean, arms and legs everywhere, and here, it's like we were talking about before with love of particular parts of the game. It's like, totally embracing who and what you are and just running with it, beyond belief. And so, yeah, I guess there's a lesson in that. But thanks so much for saying that. It means a lot. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you bet. Well, and thanks again. We're gonna go off air here, but yeah, thanks for everybody that tuned in to watch, and for those people in the future, whatever year in the future it was.
That's right.
This is what 2016 was like.
Yeah, this is the technology, man.
And depending on what the election is in a few days, who knows? It's wild right now. That's all I can say. So
buy your canned goods, bottled water. God only knows.
All right. Well, I appreciate it. And I forgot to say, I suppose if your party gets boring, you're going to have a 3-ring binder of science notes that you can,
Yeah, I'll just disappear to a corner. Yeah, just underlining stuff. Always very popular. With a big binder that says injury biomechanics, and a soda.
I was gonna say, is this for graduate work? No. Oh, okay.
I just like playing games where people are grievously wounded.
Yeah. At least it's all that alternative fiction, or is that what Wesley called it? Some other name.
Speculative fiction.
Yeah. Fantastic. All right. Well, thanks everybody. Again, you can support Child's Play on the BrigadeCon homepage, or if you buy a T-shirt, all the proceeds go. So let's help kids in hospitals get a ray of hope. And yeah, thanks for that last word, Pat. Be true to ourselves as we go on, Brigade. So.